welcome to the Motorsport Coaching Podcast, sponsored by MotiV8 Training Management. This is a podcast where we talk to drivers and industry experts to help you maximize your performances on and off the track. Let's get started with today's show. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to episode 83 of the Motorsport Coaching Podcast. I am your host, Belinda Risley, and this week I'm joined by super driver, super coach, Ross Bentley from Speed Secrets. For those who don't know about Ross or haven't checked out his resources, please race over to speedsecrets.com and see what he has to offer. We're going to be talking about driver development on and off the track today, about Ross's successful career over in the US, and about getting sponsorship. All right, Ross, well, thank you very much for joining us on the Motorsport Coaching Podcast.
I'm really looking forward to talking to you because I love racing and I love talking about it almost as much as I love racing.
Yes, you have been racing for a very long time. Let's go from the start. How did you get started in motorsports?
My father built race cars and worked on race cars when I was a kid. So I went to my first race when I was 5 years old. And like a lot of kids that say, hey, I want to grow up to be an astronaut, or I want to do this, or what, at 5, I said I want to be a race car driver. And fortunately, I never grew up. And I still feel like a 5-year-old, playing at this. So.
Yeah. So what did you start off with? Did you start on circuit, speed?
Actually, my father was involved with sprint cars, oval track.
Yep.
Winged and unwinged sprint cars, and so that's what I grew up around. And so I was kind of always into that oval track racing and wanted to go and race the Indy 500 and things. But at the same time, very early on, when I was like 10 or 11 years old, a friend's older brother gave me a bunch of old road and track magazines, and I started reading about Formula One and Jimmy Clark and Dan Gurney and the Ford GTs against the Ferraris at Le Mans in the mid-'60s. And I started reading about all these things. And so I kind of fell in love with the whole road racing and Formula One world as well. And, to me, it was just all about, I just want to go racing. It didn't matter where. I wanted to win the Formula One World Championship and the Indy 500 and Le Mans. That's all.
Ross, no, just aiming high, Ross. Why not?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I never did win those three things. So, but, I got the chance to, race. I raced in Indy cars and, got to go and race at Gold Coast in IndyCar races a couple of times. And so I did get a chance to race at that level. Unfortunately, I was always in a really small, under budgeted team and never quite got the results I wanted. But that then led to racing in sports cars, IMSA, American Le Mans Series, driving prototype sports cars and GT cars and things, and finally getting paid to drive race cars, which is the best thing that anybody could ever get to do. Yeah. And made a good career doing that, and still love when I get a chance to get behind the wheel to this day.
Fantastic. So did you ever race in the dirt, or did you just go straight to circuit?
I did. My very first race was actually in a sprint car. And, one of those weird things, the way things worked out, I ended up winning my very first race ever. And so
it seeded the bug.
Yeah. If there was ever any chance that I was going to be able to walk away from this thing and have a normal life, it went away that night. So, yeah.
Oh, fantastic. So you have done all those categories. Do you have a favorite?
It's kind of like the question when somebody says, what's the favorite car that for you to drive? And I go, the next one. For me, it's just, I love all forms of motorsport. It's, I love road racing. I love endurance racing. I love sprint racing. I love oval track racing. Some of the most fun races I ever did was in an Indy car on a 1 mile oval. I think that's just the most intense, mentally challenging, just overall challenging racing I've ever done in my life. And when it's right, it is absolutely magic. It is so much fun. The downside is if your car is not quite right on an oval, it's one of those times when you kind of go, I'm not sure I want to do this. So, Yeah. So I enjoy it all, and doesn't matter if it's GT cars, production cars, open wheel cars, prototype sports cars, you name it.
That's on.
Yeah.
Anything
Four
that's
wheels.
on, it's got wheels, 4 wheels, and it's rotating. You're there, you're watching, you're committed.
Yeah, and I came really close to going and doing some motorcycle racing at one point in time, and fortunately, my body, I think, thanks me for not quite having the chance to do it. So I survived that part of it. So I've stuck to 4 wheels.
Fantastic. So you have been involved in the sports for a very long time. What are some of those changes you've seen over the years from the time when you were participating to now at your time as a performance coach?
What has changed? Everything. The obvious answer would be technology. But I think, one of the things that definitely has changed has been the acceptance of, even more than the acceptance, but the acceptance of coaching. When I first started racing, and especially when I first started coaching in North America, at least, I was one of the very first people to kind of call themselves a coach and actually do what I consider today to be coaching. And there was a lot of pushback. There was a lot of, you just get in the car and stand on the throttle and go fast. And, so I think the way people are approaching racing today in terms of, it's like learning anything and developing your skills. And I think because competition's I'm not going to say it's any more difficult, but it keeps there's a finer and finer line between what it takes to win and what you won't win with. And because of that, everybody's looking for an edge. And one of the edges now is having the right, everything from fitness, nutrition, to the mental game, to the right skill development, all of those things. And that has been a huge part of the changes, I guess, within the sport. And then obviously the technology side of it, being able to use more tools to help us that, I think about, the days of, AJ Foyt and Mario Andretti, or Jack Brabham and Jimmy Clark, them looking at data on a computer screen. It's like,
yeah,
you can't even imagine that. They were just like, go stand on the throttle, go fast. So, that whole part of it has changed, obviously, a whole lot. And just, again, everybody's looking for that edge, and that edge is becoming smaller and smaller. So you have to look to the details a lot more than you ever did in the past, I'd say.
Yeah, and that's something that we're very passionate about over here at MotiV8, is about, defining everything. Like, more and more, you need to be more of a holistic driver, as you're saying, and have everything in tune, not just your vehicle, but also your body, your mind, your nutrition.
It is all of it. And, if somebody thinks they're going to make it, and make it could be, I want to be the best club racer. I want to be the best track day driver. I want to be the best whatever. I want to be Formula One champion, whatever. To think that you're going to make it without going after all those little pieces, you're just fooling yourself. It can't be done. And, I think one of the things is, there was a time, I think, when somebody said, or somebody had just a lot of natural talent, and that natural talent would take them a long, long ways.
Yeah.
I think today that natural talent it gets you the opportunity, but it's what you do with that natural talent that's going to make the difference. And I don't know if that's changed, but for sure that's the case today. Natural talent isn't going to take you all the way.
Nope. And that's something that I promote all the time, guys. So yeah. Saying, again, teams are looking for that whole package. They're looking to see what sponsors you can bring. They're looking to see how you're promoting yourself on social media, who you are.
Yes. And I think the point that you say of who you are, one of the things that I've worked with a lot of young drivers is, I'll say to them, imagine going to a test, with, the Mercedes F1 team, or, an IndyCar team, or a V8 supercar team, or whoever it is. And you and another driver there are testing. And at the end of the day, you both have turned the exact same lap time. it's going to come down to who you are outside of the car. And sometimes the difference is, like you said, I mean, how many social media followers do you have? It could be, just, I always ask drivers, what's your hook?
Yes.
What is it that makes you different than every other driver? And if somebody says, well, I'm fast, sorry, that's not good enough. There needs to be something, Daniel Ricciardo, I mean, one of the things that his hook is his personality, that smile, just him being him. I got to think, I'm not saying that's taken anything away from his skill behind the wheel, but I'll bet there have been doors that have opened for him and opportunities have happened for him because of that personality that he has.
Yeah, without a doubt. And one of the first things when I'm teaching sponsorship is talk about branding and all of that falling under that. Like, who do you want to be known as? What is your brand? What's your mantra? What is basically your elevator pitch? And people just kind of like roll their eyes, or they want to skip over that part and they're like, I just want to get sponsors. It's like, well, until you know who you are and like what are your values, it's very hard to move forward to find sponsors that are going to work with you or race teams that are going to work with you, because these are the things they're looking for.
And it's almost sad how many drivers don't get that.
I know.
So I'm glad that you're doing that, because that to me is just so critical. And I've worked with some young drivers through the years who the reason they are where they are today is because they did get that. And obviously, again, it's not taking anything away from their ability behind the wheel of the car, but they also had the ability outside of the car as well. Yeah,
and it's really important to keep refining those skill sets. And, I feel like motorsport is a business, is something that we're really trying to push here. And you've got to continue to be doing personal development and also doing other business skill sets, as like learning more public speaking, identifying your social media, and, even niching down to who you want your fans to be is long-term going to help you with your sponsorship as well.
It's interesting. I was just talking to a friend the other day, and they were kind of asking, some of the stuff about what I've done in my career and things. And I said, I've had one job in my life, like a real job where I went somewhere each day and then came home, and at the end of a couple of weeks, they paid me something. And then, one day I came home and I went, I quit my job because I'm going to make it as a professional race driver. And the following week, what I did was I signed up to take a public speaking course. And in school, I was the kid who, if I was asked to stand in front of 3 people and talk, I would get sick to my stomach. Yes. Like, I'm the most introverted, shy person you'll ever meet in your life. And I could just, the idea of talking to 3 people would make me sick. But I knew that my career depended on it. So I went and signed up, and I took a 4-day public speaking course where I had to stand up and do that for 4 days in a row. And it was one of the most uncomfortable, difficult, challenging things I ever did in my life. But I know it made a difference to my career.
I combat that fear by doing Facebook Lives. Like, I hate doing Facebook Lives.
Yeah.
They make me sick to the core. As much preparation as I do beforehand, I want to try not to look at my notes. I want to try to be looking at the camera. Everything I'm actually, trying to teach, but it makes me sick to my core. But I know if I keep doing it, it's going to get better. And again, like, nobody's perfect. I just encourage all the motorsport athletes just to start somewhere, like with the video, with the public speaking, with the interviews, with Facebook Lives, podcasts, whatever is their thing that resonates with them.
And I'll tell you, the one really quick story was very early on in my career. I one of my very first professional road racing wins that I ever had. And afterwards, I got invited to go to the local TV station to be on their like midnight sports talk show thing. And I can remember kind of like, I was terrified. And I remember getting there to the studio, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, I'm shaking, I'm sweating. I'm just freaking out. And then I went, I just won a professional race. How difficult can this be? And it kind of helped me, it made me calm down and kind of go, oh, okay, it's not that difficult. Like, it's just talking. So, do I get nervous to this day when I do it? Yes, but I think it's good nervous, because I think there's a bad nervous where you then underperform. But I think if you ever get to the point where you're not just a little bit nervous.
That's right.
you don't care enough.
That's right. You're not committed.
Yeah, you're not committed. You don't care enough. So anyways, that was a big moment for me where I kind of went, compared to what I've done on a racetrack, talking on TV, that's easy. So you can frame it that way, and it does make it easier.
Yeah. But of course, it makes it easy that you're talking about yourself, or sometimes it makes it hard, depending on what type of personality you are. But
yeah, the talking about myself part is not the part that I enjoy, but the talking about racing, if it's just, somebody saying how'd the race go, I could talk about that for 4 days, right? At least they're not asking us questions about politics or, global warming or something that we're like, well, I'm not sure I know enough about that. We're talking about what we love. So, and again, if you don't love it, well, then you're in the wrong place anyway. So
you are a lover of the sport. You've been in it over 25 years. You've been an author of 10 books. What made you get started in book writing and becoming an author? Was it the lack of resources you had when you started your career?
I would love it if it was that, but no, it was actually, again, in school, I was probably, I would have been voted the least likely person to ever write a book. That was not something that was ever a big part of what I did. I guess I've always had a little bit of a creative streak in me. I've got, I like to draw, and so there's a creative part of me. But when I was, as a driver, you're always you need other things in your career to make a living. And one of the things I started doing was teaching other drivers how to drive on tracks. And then I started a high performance and race driving school. And one of the first things I did was I put together a little, I think originally it was like about a 3 or 4 page document that was like the basics of driving around a track. And I wrote that up. And then, each year I would kind of make it a little better. And then as I started getting it higher up in professional racing in my hometown in Vancouver in Canada, the Vancouver newspaper asked me to write an article every week about driving, safe driving, like driving on the street. So kind of IndyCar driver teaches people how to be a safe driver on the street, kind of an article. So I was forced to write an article every single week for the newspaper, which is, again, it was slightly terrifying in the beginning, but it was one of the best things that ever happened to me, because it forced me to do this. And like anything, like driving a car, the more you write, the better you get at it. So long story short, as I was racing Indy cars, every time I was always big in taking notes and making notes, and kind of after a race weekend, I'd write down, what did I learn this weekend? Mm-hmm. And I found that the more I wrote things down, the more clear it became in my head, and therefore I was better able to do it. So if I wanted to learn a skill, what I would do is write how I would teach that skill to somebody else. Mm-hmm. So I just kept collecting. I had this document that I just kept putting stuff into. And eventually one day I was like, wow, this has turned into this big document. And I gave it to a friend who was a journalist, who said, oh, this is the book. I'm going to send it to a friend, to somebody who knows somebody who's a book publisher. And the publisher came back and said, we want to publish your book. And I'm like, my book? I didn't write. Oh, I guess I wrote a book. And so they published that. And that was the very first Speed Secrets book. And about the time they were publishing it, I went, oh, but now there's so much more that really should be in that. So then I wrote another one. And then with a friend of mine who had helped me a lot to learn around the mental game of driving, we co-wrote Inner Speed Secrets around the mental part of racing. So we did that together. And then it became my outlet. Every time I was on an airplane, which is half my life, I would sit on a plane and I would write. And again, it was kind of my way of figuring things out. If I wanted to learn more about trail braking, or I wanted to learn more about motorsport sponsorship, I would write about it. And I just found that the more I wrote about it, the better my knowledge of it was. And of course, once you start, then a publisher then goes, do you have something else for us? And so I never set out to write a book. And actually, I have one time the publisher came to me and said, would you write a book about this? And I did that one time. but I write for the joy of it. And for, in some ways I kind of say I write it for selfish reasons because it helps me understand. And as a side benefit, it helps other people learn. And I do get a huge, huge kick out of helping other drivers now. There was a time when, to be a professional race driver, you have to be selfish. There's a certain level of it's all about me. And I went through that, but kind of when I got to a certain point in my career when I felt like I didn't have anything else to prove, like I was still getting paid to drive, but it wasn't like I had to prove to get that next ride. Yeah. And then other times it's like my whole way of looking at it has changed to, it has nothing to do with me. It has everything about to do with the drivers that I'm helping today. And that's why I write and do everything else that I do today.
Yeah, and that comes right back to, again, like your branding, like that's now part of you as your drive, and that's what you developed over the years as well. So writing was something that you did enjoy. As I said, so whether, people want to do videos all the time or if they want to do vlogs all the time, your thing started out to be a blog, turned into a book. Now this is your brand and it's giving you a life after motorsports driving career, and something that, now you're leaving a legacy for the other drivers.
Yeah, I wish that I could say that I set out this to do this deliberately, but no, everything I've done, I think I've kind of just stumbled into. And I would say that all I've ever done in my life is gone after things that I've enjoyed doing and wanted to do, and things have turned out reasonably well. Yes,
they have, fantastically. It's also good to showcase that if you don't make it to your ultimate goal, that there are other avenues within the motorsport industry that you can get involved in.
And that's a conversation I have with a lot of young drivers, and ask them where they want to be and what they want to do, and they're like, I want to race in Formula One, and that's it. Yes. I'm like, great, fantastic. You need to have that drive, but have an open mind to what else happens along the way, because there are other opportunities will pop up along the way, and don't just totally discard them. I'm a big believer that if you have a lot of backup plans, you're going to need them. Mm-hmm. A lot of kids coming from karting and going into cars, and what I'll say to them sometimes is sell all your karting equipment, get rid of it, because if you have it and things don't quite work out for you, it's pretty easy to go back into karting. But if you don't have anything to fall back into, then you got to make that work, and you're going to push that much harder to make it. But at the same time, be open to other opportunities that come along. And for me, everything was all about driving in Indy cars, but there came a time when I got a call from an IMSA sports car team, and they said, "Would you come and test?" And I'm like, "Why not?" And I went and tested, and they immediately offered me a job, and I'm like, "I get paid to do this?" Like, my IndyCar career was very much around, we needed to find sponsorship to make it work. And there were some pretty lean years where we didn't have a lot of money. But all of a sudden this sports car team's going, we'll pay you. And they were going to pay me very well. So, and it's not all about the money, but it was a great opportunity to race at the top for one of the best teams and have the opportunity to prove what I've always wanted to prove, which was I could drive a race car well.
Yeah, and if you said no or you weren't open to that opportunity, you would never have that, and maybe written those books as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Who knows where everything's going to go. Yeah.
Fantastic. And so what are you actually doing now, Ross?
Well, I would say helping drivers of all levels become better drivers. Simple as that's kind of the overarching thing of what I do. And so I coach drivers that are racing professionally. I work with a lot of drivers that are doing, car club, weekend, casual, amateur, going to the track on the weekend and having fun with their car at a circuit. And, so I either go and do talks for them or seminar workshops for them, or I'm doing a lot more creating online training videos and webinars and things like this because I can reach more drivers that way. So, the simple answer to your question is, what am I doing today? I'm helping drivers become better drivers.
Yeah, with lots of content. And so if people are interested in your webinars, where can they find out about them?
My website, speedsecrets.com. Basically everything that I do is somehow linked at that speedsecrets.com website, from the webinars to, I post a ton of like free content on there. Every week I have an Ask Ross column where people send me emails and ask me questions, and I just put them out there. And I just find I just have a lot of fun helping drivers. And 6 months later, somebody sends an email or gives me a call and says, "Hey, I took your webinar and now I've just knocked off a second off my best lap times, and I'm more consistent, and mentally I'm prepared, or I'm better prepared," and all these things. So that's almost my payment now. Yeah.
So Ross, you sound very passionate about the sport. What do you love about it?
Just about everything. And to be fair, I would say that the one thing that where I got to in my career, and every driver is different, but where I got to in my career, I had gone many, many years of chasing sponsors and doing all the media work and all that stuff, and that allowed me to get behind the wheel of the car, and it was worth every fraction of a second of that, and every bit of effort I ever put into that. But I did get to a point where, after a number of years of getting paid well to drive race cars, where the economy took a dive. A lot of there weren't as many seats available in racing, and there came a time where it was like, I'm gonna have to go look for sponsors again. And that was the one thing that I was not willing to do anymore, was go look for sponsors and do that chasing down the next ride part of it. And so when you ask, what do I love about it? I love every part of it. There are some parts I don't love as much as I used to. And to be fair, I really enjoyed the whole marketing sponsorship side of it, because I found what I learned from a business perspective on that has been massively important to the rest of my life. And I'm very, very grateful that I learned a lot about business and marketing through the sponsorship, prospecting and servicing and all that side of it. I learned so much about the business side that's helped me. So I don't regret any of that. But if my job today relied on me going out and getting a sponsor so I could get behind the wheel of the car, I'm probably going to sit and wait for somebody to call me up and say, "Hey, would you come and drive my car?" And unfortunately, that's the one part I've gotten tired of.
Well, there's lucky that there's places like us that can help you with that.
Exactly. So now I would just turn around and hand it to you, say, "Do it for me." But I also understand, I believe that even if I was to come to you and say, "Belinda, would you market me? Would you help me with that part of it?" I can't just stand back and go, "You do it all." I've got to be involved. I've got to be working with you. I've got to do the homework. I've got to do a lot of legwork. It's up to me as well, because if I just leave it to you.
No, that's right. So we don't actually get sponsorship for drivers, as stated. We give them all the tools for them to go do it, and then we can help them along the way, because obviously it's about them building partnerships and relationships, and people buy from people. So it's hard to sell someone sponsorship or a partnership if they don't know who they're selling, who they're investing in. So
yeah, and that just triggered a thought when you asked the question of what do I love about the sport. I would say there's two things that, other than when I get into a car, man, just driving a car at the limit, it's still magical to me. It's so much fun. But there are two other things. And one is the people that I meet and the people that I work with and spend time around in the sport. That's one of the things that I love about the sport. I look at the opportunities that I've had and the people that I've met. I was actually, about a month or so ago, I was telling somebody, we were talking, and they were asking me something about, some of the people that I met. And actually one of the amazing experiences I had was actually in Australia. After doing the IndyCar race, had gone to the BMW driver training center, and I can't remember the exact location of that. And at one point at lunch, sitting down at a table and eating some lunch, and this fellow came over and sat down at the table with me. and it was Denny Hume.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going, this is Denny Hume sitting at a table. And I sat and talked with him for 20, 30 minutes. It was unfortunate. It was a month or two later when he passed away. So, I mean, how incredible an experience for somebody like myself to be able to sit and have met and talked with somebody like Denny Hume. So the people I've met, but the other part of it is the part that I love about racing is learning.
Yes.
And to me, it's a massive learning experience. And what I've learned from the sport has been as important as what I learn about doing the sport, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what does your wife think about the sport? Is she involved in it as well, or is she supportive of your career choices?
Fortunately, we met at a racetrack.
Oh, fantastic.
So she loves the sport as much as I do. You know, on the rare weekends when I'm home, you know, we sit down and we watch the Formula One races or an IndyCar race or whatever. You know, it's kind of like the first question is, what racing's on TV today? And so and for many years she traveled with me to all the races when I was racing myself. And her only complaint today is, I would, she's saying, I would like to go to more races.
Well, that's a great thing to have.
Yeah. So we have a great relationship, and I come home and we talk about racing. So it's I'm very fortunate that way.
Oh, very good.
But I would highly recommend, if at all possible, find yourself a partner who loves the sport as much as you do. It makes life a whole lot easier.
That's what I was getting at.
Yeah.
And so, Ross, you don't just deal with the motorsport industry. You do also do business speaking external to businesses and organizations. What kind of presentations are you doing, and why did you get into speaking?
So when I was doing a number of seminars and workshops for drivers years ago, and it was mostly around, I was calling, they were inner speed secrets seminars, and it was around the mental game of driving. And I'd have a group of drivers come in, some very young, some older, the typical gentleman driver, come to these things. And then, 6 months later or a month later or whatever, I'd get an email from somebody saying, hey, thank you. I'm driving faster now, but I'm using the same strategies and concepts in my business, and the performance of my business has improved. Would you come and do a workshop for my sales team, for example? So that was the first time that kind of happened. And I started doing that, and I started realizing that, performance is performance, whether that performance is driving a car, or it's for a sales team, or it's for management or whatever. And the other part is that I found that coaching, it's all about bringing the best performance out of somebody. People say, how do you coach somebody? Do you spend a lot of time talking about the apex of a corner? And it's like, yeah, kind of. But to me, it's all about bringing the best performance out of somebody.
Yes.
And if you think about it, to me, as a manager, a leader of a business or a team of people in a corporate setting, it's no different. It's just about bringing out the best performance in your employees. So I started applying those same concepts to businesses. And along the way, again, because the career of a race car driver is not the most solid, reliable thing, I've started a few different companies and built some companies. And so I've had kind of these little laboratory experiments called my businesses that I could apply these same principles to, and found that they worked. And so I for a number of years, I was doing a lot of corporate coaching as well. So executive coaching, and going in and doing different training sessions for different teams within an organization. And yeah, it's the same thing. It's rewarding because you're helping people perform better.
I agree. And do you work much with teams?
I have actually, and
like motorsport teams.
Yeah, so I've worked with race teams. I've worked with other sports teams. One of the funniest ones was, and I won't make a long story short or long story out of this, but my nephew played lacrosse, which was a very popular sport in the area that we lived in at the time. And he asked me to come in and help his team, and then the coach saw the results I was getting, and I ended up coaching their team to going on and winning the championship. And I had never held a lacrosse stick in my life. Like, I didn't know how to play the game, but it was all about just bringing the best performance out of people. So, I've done that, and then I've worked with race teams as well, where, we know that a lot of times what holds the driver back is the preparation, and not just the preparation, the details, the mechanical parts of the car, but how a team works together. And so I do some workshops, seminars, and trainings with different teams as well. That's all fun as well. Yeah,
and I still think there's a lot of education around the benefits of coaching teams from a race perspective. I think right now, maybe in Australia, or I don't know if it's a universal thing, but there isn't a much training or cohesions around teams, and the importance of doing team training like pit crew training, even for something simple as doing fitness-based training, that everyone's just doing that together. I think it's kind of like, well, we look after the driver, we do that, and then that person does that, and then that person does that, and maybe the pit crew might practice changing the tires, but they're not practicing working together, relationship buildings, or personality disc profiling, or the 5 love languages, or anything like that, in order to know how to work with somebody. They're kind of all just running together, and it's like, well, your job's this, your job's that, you just do it, and it's all going to work together. But we know it doesn't happen like that. There doesn't seem to be any emphasis, again, especially over here, that it's important to build that team cohesion.
And I think, kind of going back to one of your first questions was what's changing in the sport. And I would say that's an area that is changing. And, a few years ago, there was none of that. And I would say in certain parts of the sport, I mean, in NASCAR, I know that the top teams spend a lot of time working on that now.
Fantastic.
And, so it's coming in. I would say the top IndyCar teams, I don't know for a fact, but I got to think that, I got to think that a guy like Toto Wolff understands the importance of teamwork, and the Mercedes F1 team it's not just the money that makes them win so often.
Yes.
It's that team. So I think it's happening there, and it will trickle down just like some of the other things. At one time, tuning shock absorbers was only for, one team at the very top of the pyramid kind of thing. And now every team does. And so, it's going to come down. And I think that part of the team building part of it, I think will grow. It has to.
Fingers crossed.
It's an opportunity.
I know, that's right. I'm just trying to push it along, Ross.
Yeah.
Ross, when do you think people engage with your services, or what kind of point of career? I know you mentioned you do work with a range of drivers at the moment, but is there a defining point in their career, or does something happen for them in order to engage with you?
That's an interesting question. I would say I guess the obvious answer would be when they recognize there's an opportunity where they can improve. And actually, I'm fortunate to be in a position as a coach now where I can actually be fairly selective about who I work with. And if somebody says, "Hey, I'd like you to coach me," my first, and I can't just ask the question because the answer is going to be kind of an obvious one, but what I want to try to find out is, how bad do they want to learn?
Yeah.
And if they truly, truly want to learn and they want to improve and are willing to put in the effort to do what it takes to do that, then I am super pumped, excited to work with them. If they kind of give me I'll do that, that's not somebody that I particularly want to work with. And so I would say that, who should be looking for a coach, and not just me, but a good coach. And by the way, I believe there are a lot of coaches out there, and there are some that are really, really good. And it's worthwhile looking for the ones that are really, really good. It's a smaller number, but they get the results. But I would say that, if somebody is kind of thinking about what do they need to do to get to the next level, a coach can make a huge, huge difference.
Yeah, well, like you said, it's giving them that competitive advantage of performance.
I would, and in some places, it's almost if you don't have that, you're not going to be able to keep up. Some you're going to get an advantage. Some you need a coach just to stay there because everybody else has got a coach. And I know, and I know it's different around in different series and different, different areas of the world. But in North America, there are certain series where I'm going to say 90% of the drivers have a coach. So if you don't have one, you're probably going to get left behind.
And is that where you're based now?
I am. I'm based in the U.S., but up until year 2020 and the situation we're in at the moment, I would travel internationally a fair bit. It used to be, it was getting to the point where I'd make at least one trip to Australia every year. And it's now been coming up on a year and a half since I was there last. And so getting back to Australia, and 2 years ago, I spent most of my season in Europe. And every now and then I get some really fun opportunities to go do something in Korea or Sweden or Estonia or someplace, so it's fun to be able to do that part of it. But yeah, I spend the bulk of my time traveling US and Canada.
That's the power of saying yes, isn't it? All those opportunities.
Yes.
That's right.
And I would say again, kind of going back to the books thing, it's kind of a funny thing how I never set out to write a book, but I did. And it's interesting how many times that I've gotten somebody contacts me and says, I want the guy who's written the book to come and coach me. So come to China and coach me. And I'd go to China to do that because, it certainly wasn't the intention, but it's funny how that works.
And Ross, you did say you do most of your writing on the aeroplanes. Is that how you divided or maneuvered your way into the pilot industry? How did you end up writing a book about working in the pilot industry?
Well, that's interesting is because 5-6 years ago, I opened my email inbox up and there's an email from a fellow who lives in Melbourne. And he says, I've been reading your Inner Speed Secrets book about the mental game and I race, but I happen to be a pilot as well for an Australian airline. And so we started trading emails back and forth and talking about the similarities between flying and driving a car. And, obviously he had the perspective of as a pilot, but also as a race driver. And so I think Phil was the first one that kind of said, hey, do you want to take what you've written about driving race cars and adapt it, change it, write it for pilots? And I'm like, that sounds like fun. So that's what we ended up doing. And it was interesting that we spent, I think, close to 4 or 5 years back and forth by email and Dropbox and back and forth collaboratively putting this book together called Performance Pilot. And we put it together. We self-published it. It's out there. It's selling on Amazon and everywhere else. And it wasn't until about 1.5 years ago that we actually met face to face. When I came to Melbourne, it was like, wow, we finally got a chance to meet face to face. So it was really, really fantastic experience. And then, we through the process become really good friends, and it's been fun. And then I've always had a fascination with helicopters. Mm-hmm. So I've always wanted to learn to fly helicopters. So last year I started taking lessons to get my pilot's license to fly helicopters. So some of the stuff that we'd been working on dealing with, focused on flying a pilot, now I was actively using in my process of learning to fly helicopters. So it's been just a whole kind of interesting how it all worked together. And, Phil and I, like I said, have become really good friends out of this. And we've got this book called Performance Pilot. And travel around and I talk to somebody and they're like, yeah, I fly but I also race. And I'm like, I got a book for you. So it's pretty cool.
See, that's another great example of saying yes to an opportunity.
Exactly. Yeah. I could have very easily said, and I would say one of the things that I try to do is every email, I answer every single email. Somebody sends me an email out of the blue. I reply to them. And, it would have been very easy for me to get this email and go, yeah, okay, delete. But we started a conversation and it turned into a great friendship and a book. And, are we becoming we keep joking that, when we sell enough of them, we're going to buy an island and we're going to live on this island. So let's just say we're a long, long way away from that. Don't write a book thinking that you're going to get rich someday.
No. Yeah. And so, Ross, you also have the podcast called The Speed Secrets.
Yeah.
Yeah. And tell us a little bit about the guests and things that you have on that show.
So I started the podcast maybe a little bit, there was a little selfish side to that. And that is, I like communicating through writing. Mm-hmm. But I knew that I could be a better verbal communicator. And I thought, well, maybe everybody's podcasting these days. Maybe I should start one myself so I can practice that. And I also thought it'd be a really great excuse to connect with people that I don't get a chance to have great in-depth conversations with. Mm-hmm. So I started it thinking, I'll do this for a few months. Well, it's now, I don't know, something like 150 or 160 episodes later. And it's been really, really fun because I get to have conversations with people that I normally wouldn't get a chance to. Sometimes they're drivers that I've known for 20 years and I raced against. But at the racetrack, you kind of go, hey, how you doing? And have a good weekend, whatever kind of thing. But I've never had a chance to sit down and really kind of go, how do you approach driving? And my podcast is meant to be educational. There are a lot of, like yours, there are a lot of podcasts out there, I think, they're entertainment.
Yes.
I wanted my podcast to, obviously I hoped it would be somewhat entertaining, otherwise nobody would tune in. But I wanted every episode somebody to leave the podcast and go, oh, I got to work on that next time I go to the track. And so I've been able to have lots of drivers, coaches, engineers, a lot of the people that I know in the sport, and some of them that I didn't know super well, but the podcast gives you an excuse to connect with them.
Right.
But I've also had an opportunity. I have in a couple weeks. There's a book that I read 25 years ago that had a big impact on me called Thinking Body, Dancing Mind. Mm-hmm. Sounds all very Zen-like. Well, it is kind of Zen-like. It's about the Zen of sport. And written by a sports psychologist, Dr. Jerry Lynch, and a Zen practitioner, Al Huang. And I just recently stumbled across a podcast that Dr. Jerry Lynch was doing. So I reached out to him, and in a couple of weeks, I'm going to have him on my podcast.
Fantastic.
Having a conversation about the impact that his book had on me as an athlete. And it's going to be really fun because, his way of looking at it is a very Zen-like approach. Mm-hmm. And I would say that that book had a big impact on the way I looked at competition, especially because I was the person that, if we got out of a car and we're walking into a store, I had to get to the door of the store before you did because I needed to win that race as well. And just, that book had a big impact. So sorry about this, rambling on about the podcast, but the podcast has been fantastic for me to be able to connect with and talk to some people that I would normally wouldn't have. I never would have had a chance to talk to this Dr. Jerry Lynch, but I will in a couple of weeks. I'm really excited about that.
Oh, fantastic. We'll have to keep our eyes and ears out for that next episode. But well done on hitting a milestone. I think everyone thinks that doing a podcast is quite easy, but there's a lot that goes behind the scenes, isn't there, Ross?
Well, congrats to you on that. The biggest thing with a podcast, it never ends. Like you finish one and it's like, okay, now I got to start. There's a lot of work into it. And I put out a weekly e-newsletter that people subscribe to. And every single week, I mean, we're going into we've been doing it every single week, never missed a week in coming up to 7 years.
Wow.
And so that's a big commitment. And then the podcast is a weekly thing. And I did take a little break last fall from the podcast, but yeah, you're right. I mean, it's a big commitment, isn't it?
Yes. Yes. I struggle trying to put out a newsletter fortnightly. So well done. Weekly.
Yeah. The only thing that keeps me going is those all the time on an airplane, because that's when I get everything done. So yeah. Yeah.
We're not going anywhere fast here in Oz at the moment, nor have we since March. So there's no motivation has been running low, fair to say.
But I would say that there's a lot of drivers that I've talked to who have said the lockdown with the pandemic is, obviously it's a terrible thing. The sooner we can get through this, the better, safely. But a lot of drivers have taken time to step back and really evaluate what they're doing from the business side of their profession, or even like amateurs who don't have to worry so much about that side of it, but they're really looking at their own performance and what can they do. And it's not just I'm going to prepare the car better, but it's what can they do to prepare themselves, whether it's fitness or changing their diet or having a regular mental training program that goes, there are a lot of drivers that go to the gym 5 days a week. Ask them, what do they do for their mental training? To go, what?
Yeah.
Why not have a mental training program that you do a session every day, 5 days a week? So I think a lot of drivers are taking advantage of this time. And obviously the whole sim racing world has helped that. Yeah. And it's a very big thing. And I spend a lot of time in that area as well. But I think I have seen drivers who have, because in the US, we're back to racing and have been for a couple months now. I've seen drivers who have come back and they're performing better than they ever have. And it's because of the prep and the change and the way they're changed their training in the downtime. So if you're sitting around getting demotivated, flip that around the other way and crank it up. Because when you come back, you need to perform.
Yeah, there's going to be, unfortunately here in Australia, there's been some states that have been open, so they've been able to continue to race, and some states that haven't. So it's just hard for those states that haven't been able to compete. As I said, they're feeling some of the other states are getting that competitive advantage, especially when it goes to national racing. So it's that top end of racing for us over here in Oz. But hopefully we'll be back soon. So we are all looking forward to all getting back motivated again. Bryce, you've given us lots of information today. I thank you very much for your time. Do you have any parting words for someone getting started in motorsports?
Focus on learning, because you will never ever get to a point where it's like, that's it, I've learned everything. If you go out and you qualify on the pole, setting a lap record, you lead every lap of the race, you lap the entire field, you should be getting out of the car and going, that felt really good, I performed well today, what could I have done better? Because that's what the very best do. They're constantly looking at, what can I do to get better? Lewis Hamilton is not winning championships just because he's in the best car, but it's because he's looking at it, what can I do even better? The whole team is doing that. So, and I think there is value in simply having learning as an objective. So rather than the objective being, I want to win, if the objective is, I want to learn, then I'm going to improve. And by improving, I've actually increased my chances of winning. So I think most drivers have had the experience of trying really hard to turn a fast lap, and it doesn't happen. But when you go in focused on what can I learn and just learn from the act of driving, and in that process, you perform at a higher level than you have before, you've increased your chances of winning. So it is a kind of a way of kind of flipping it around in your mind. But the whole thing is focus on the learning part, and you'll continue to grow and improve, and your chances of winning go up, and your opportunities for other things in your life go up as well.
It's fantastic advice. Thank you so much, Ross. I'm assuming the best way for people to follow you and to get in contact with you is at speedsecrets.com everywhere, like on Facebook.
Yeah, my Facebook thing is Driver Coach. My Instagram is Ross Bentley. My Twitter is @SpeedSecrets. That's a little messy, but if you go to speedsecrets.com, there's a little icon. You can click on each one of them. So
that's right. And we'll put all the links for you guys to follow Ross on your preferred platform on today's show notes. Before I let you go, Ross, I have to ask you, obviously an international race car driver, what is your favorite race track?
My favorite racing track? Ooh. So my first answer to that is always the next one.
Yes.
Because the next one I go and drive will be my favorite. Interestingly, so when people in North America ask me that question, what's your favorite racetrack? They think North America because that's the way they're thinking. In North America, I'm going to say it's Motorsport, which is now Canadian Tire Motorsport Park. Motorsport. It is the fastest, most amazing track. But then I'll say, but in the world, Phillip Island.
Yes, Phillip Island.
I love Phillip Island. It is such an amazing racetrack, but part of what makes a racetrack is the area, what's around it. Phillip, you guys are so fortunate down there to have that so close. I mean, it's just what a beautiful place. And I've not driven a lot of tracks there. I've coached a few times there and driven a few laps there, but just the scenery and everything else, it's just magical. So
it is beautiful. Obviously, you have raced at Gold Coast. I was thinking you were going to set the Gold Coast up for the view as well.
Yeah, that's pretty spectacular as well. And I love street circuits, but you know, again, that's such a difficult one because you know I usually make a trip to Europe every year to take a bunch of drivers to the Nürburgring and to Spa, and I got to tell you, Spa is a pretty darn amazing track, and the Nürburgring is an amazing track. But it's just part of what makes a track fantastic is the driving part. Part of it is where it's located. Part of it is the experience you have when you go there as well. If you have a great experience when you go there, it always becomes one of your favorite tracks, doesn't it?
Yes.
So. And
so are you still racing now?
Every now and then I get a race. In fact, I've got something coming up fairly soon here. And in North America, there's a lot of these, they call them low budget endurance racing. And not at the very, very low levels, but there's sort of a medium level in there. And there's some teams that ask me to come and drive with them every now and then. And there's a race called the Thunderhill 25-hour, because 24-hour race wasn't quite long enough. So they came up with a 25-hour race many years ago.
Yep.
And it happens the first weekend of December, which in North America is our winter, and it's definitely off season. So it became a place where a lot of pros would go to in the off season just to go and have a fun weekend of racing. And so did that last year and won there, and looking forward to going back there in December as well. So, yeah.
All right. We'll have to keep following to see what happens.
Yeah.
Again, thank you, Ross, for being on today's show. I really appreciate your time and, again, all that wonderful information you shared with us and the listeners.
Thank you, Belinda, and really, really appreciate it. Hopefully I didn't ramble on too long. Sorry about that. So I just get excited about this, and thank you for everything that you're doing for the sport as well and for all the drivers out there. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi guys, Alex Gardner here, go-kart racer from Queensland. I've been with MotiV8 for about a year now, and I've definitely benefited from her and her crew. Nutrition, social media, sponsorship, and exercise is what she helps me with. She also does mental strength as well. I'm looking forward to my journey ahead with MotiV8 Training.
Well, thanks everyone for listening to this week's show. I really hope you enjoyed that one as much as I did. Now, remember, all the show notes with the links and the specials mentioned in today's show are available over at motiv8training.com.au. If you haven't already, I'd really appreciate it if you could head to iTunes or Stitcher, type in Motorsport Coaching, subscribe, and leave us a review. Each week, I'll read them out and you'll go into monthly draw to win a fantastic prize. If you have any questions or comments, please email us at motiv8training.com.au or head over to our Facebook page at Motiv8T. Until next time, take care.